a criminology student, 3 months pregnant. She goes to collect $600 in rent, and she never walks out alive. And here's the part that hits hardest. Loretta Saunders spent her final months studying the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada, and then she becomes one of the names she was trying to protect. But stay with me, because in the first few hours after she vanishes, something feels off in a way you can't unsee. Her phone starts sending weird, clipped messages. Her debit card starts getting used. And security cameras catch a man leaving her building with a hockey bag, so heavy he can barely carry it. And when investigators finally realize what that bag likely contained, it becomes clear Loretta didn't disappear. She was removed. Tonight, I'm telling you the case of Loretta Saunders, a story about trust, money, control, and a kind of cold decision that turns a normal day into a nightmare. Take a breath. We're going to go step by step, because to understand how this happened, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. February 2014, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Loretta Saunders is 26 years old, and for the first time in her life, things are finally coming together. She's in her last semester at St. Mary's University, studying criminology. She's working on her honors thesis. She's just weeks away from graduating, and she's 3 months pregnant. Loretta is Inuk, an Inuit woman from Labrador, from the community of Happy Valley Goose Bay. And her life hasn't been easy, not in the neat, inspirational montage way people like to package trauma, in the real way, the heavy way, the kind that follows you into adulthood. Loretta came from a big, loving family, siblings, cousins, that kind of close bond where everyone knows everyone's voice. But love doesn't erase hardship. And Loretta went through things early on that nobody should have to go through. At one point, she left home and moved to Montreal. And this is where her story could have ended the way so many stories end, quietly, painfully, without anyone outside a small circle ever knowing. She struggled with addiction. She was homeless for a time. She was living day to day in survival mode. But here's what everyone who knew Loretta kept saying again and again. She did not quit. She refused to let that be the final version of her life. Loretta got into treatment. She stabilized. She went back to school. She finished her diploma. And then she applied to university. When the acceptance letter arrived, her family celebrated like they just watched someone beat the odds in real time. Because that's what it was. Loretta had plans, big ones. She wanted to go to law school after graduation. She wanted to become a lawyer. And when it came time to choose a thesis topic, she didn't hesitate for a second. She decided to focus her research on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The crisis in Canada that had swallowed so many lives and left so many families without answers. This wasn't abstract to her. It wasn't a hot topic. It was personal. It was close. It was something she'd seen, something she understood in her bones. And around the same time, Loretta's personal life was also in a good place. She had a boyfriend, Yelchin Sulte. They'd been together for over 2 years. They'd traveled. They talked about the future like they meant it. And then Loretta found out. She was pregnant. She was excited. Not just happy news excited, like genuinely hopeful. A baby meant a new chapter, a family, stability, a future that didn't look like survival. Loretta moved in with Yelchin, which meant her own apartment was sitting mostly empty. And like a lot of people trying to make life work while in school, she did the practical thing. She decided to sublet the apartment for extra money. That decision, logical, normal, responsible, opens the door to the 2 people who would end her life. Their names are Blake Leggett and Victoria Henneberry. They're a couple, They're broke, they need a place to stay, and Loretta agrees to rent them a room. On paper, it's simple. You pay your rent, you live here, everyone moves on. But it doesn't go like that. Almost immediately, there are problems. Payments are late. Then they're not full. Then they're not happening. Loretta tries to be patient because she knows what it's like to be short on money. She gives extensions, she sends texts, she gives time. But patience has a limit, and Loretta is not running a charity. She has bills, she has school, she's pregnant. She's trying to keep her own life together. By early February, Blake and Victoria are behind by roughly $600, and at some point, Loretta hits that moment every landlord eventually hits with problem tenants. They need to pay, or they need to go. And here's where the psychology matters. For most people, getting told pay up or move out is stressful, embarrassing, and frustrating.
But it's not an excuse to do something monstrous. For some people, though, especially when you mix desperation, immaturity, a toxic relationship, and a need for control, pressure doesn't produce problem solving. It produces rage, and the person holding you accountable stops being a person. They become an obstacle, and when someone becomes an obstacle in the wrong mind, the mind starts looking for a way to remove them. February 13th, 2014. Loretta leaves home that morning with a simple plan. She's going to her apartment to collect the rent money. She's going to handle the tenant situation. Then she's going to go back to her real life, school, thesis, pregnancy, future. Security cameras at the building captured Loretta arriving shortly before 11 a.m. She looks calm, normal, unbothered, like someone running an errand. She goes inside, and that's the last time anyone sees Loretta Saunders alive, because when investigators pull the footage later, there's something missing. There's video of her entering, but there's no video of her leaving. At first, you don't want to jump there. You think maybe there's a blind spot. Maybe she left another way. Maybe the camera missed it. But then, later that same day, Loretta's bank card starts getting used. A purchase shows up, then another. Investigators pull store surveillance footage, and the woman using Loretta's card is not Loretta. Another transaction happens at a Tim Hortons. More footage, and now you can see the driver of Loretta's car. And it's not Loretta either, but Loretta is still missing. Then there are the texts. Yelchin receives a strange message from Loretta's phone, something like, "I'm so nervous I can't even remember my mom's maiden name." That line doesn't sound like Loretta. It sounds like someone trying to access her banking info and failing. Then another text comes in, "I'm staying at a friend's place tonight. I'll talk to you later." No details. No tone of "hey, don't worry." Just short, sharp, wrong. Loretta was the kind of person who stayed in contact. Family members said she checked in constantly, multiple times a day, sometimes hourly. So when that communication suddenly stops, the silence feels loud. Days pass, no Loretta, no calls, no classes, no thesis meetings, no social media activity. Finally, the family contacts police and a missing person report is filed. Investigators start where they usually start, the inner circle. They talk to Yelchin. They search his home, and fairly quickly police do not believe he's involved. Then they go to Loretta's apartment building, 41 Cowie Hill Road, Unit 103. Inside, the apartment looks almost normal. Not trashed, not chaotic, not like a movie scene. But sometimes that's what makes it worse. Because violence doesn't always leave a dramatic mess. Sometimes it leaves order. Police try to contact the tenants, Blake and Victoria. They claim they're out of town, far away, about 200 miles. They say they can't help much, but investigators keep digging. And then they learn Blake and Victoria are wanted in connection with other issues, warrants, prior trouble. Now the picture starts to form, and 5 days after Loretta goes missing, Halifax police get a call from another department. Loretta's car has been found hundreds of miles away in Harrow, Ontario, near Windsor, near the U.S. border. The car is parked outside a private home. Inside the house are Blake Leggett and Victoria Henneberry. They're arrested for possession of a stolen vehicle and improper use of a bank card. During the search, police find Loretta's phone in Victoria's possession, and Loretta's bank cards with Blake. And now, the case isn't a mystery anymore. It's a confrontation with a simple, brutal question. If you have her car, her phone, her bank cards, her ID, where is Loretta? Blake tells police Loretta sold him the car, but that story collapses under its own weight. A pregnant woman in her last semester of college doesn't sell her car to tenants who owe her money, then vanish without telling her boyfriend, her family, her friends, her professor, anyone. That explanation isn't plausible. It's survival lying. And once investigators have Blake and Victoria in custody, they go back to Halifax and take a harder look at the building's surveillance footage. And this is the moment everything shifts. February 13th, 2:30 p.m. A camera captures Blake leaving the building holding a large hockey bag. And it looks heavy. Not gym bag heavy. Heavy like there's more in it than equipment. Heavy like it's awkward. Like it pulls you off balance. He leaves. He comes back. Then he leaves again with more bags. Then again. And at that point, investigators don't want to believe what their own eyes are telling them because the implication is too ugly. But the pattern is undeniable. It starts to look like Loretta didn't walk out of the building because she was carried out.
2 weeks after Loretta disappears, the search reaches the moment every family fears. A driver notices something unusual in the snow-covered median along Route 2, the Trans-Canada Highway near Salisbury, New Brunswick. Police respond. They find a hockey bag partially hidden in a thin patch of woods in the median. They open it. Inside is Loretta Saunders. She's been dead for nearly 2 weeks, exposed to the winter cold. The autopsy confirms what the case had been screaming for days. Loretta died of asphyxiation. She was suffocated, and she was 3 months pregnant. Now the case is officially homicide, and the charges against Blake and Victoria are upgraded. But here's something that makes this case even more chilling. Investigators eventually discover a video recorded days before the murder, February 8th. It's on Victoria's phone. And in that video, Blake and Victoria are arguing, and the conversation turns to Loretta. They talk about killing her. Not like a vague "I could kill her" rant people say in frustration. They discuss it in a way that makes detectives go cold because it sounds like the idea has already entered the room and is being handled like an option. This is important because one of the hardest things about proving premeditation is showing what the person was thinking before the act. Most killers don't film their mindset, but in this case there's a recording that shows the thought existed days earlier before Loretta even walked into that apartment, and that changes everything. As the investigation continues, authorities put together what happened that day. Loretta went to the apartment to collect rent money and deal with the eviction. She expected an uncomfortable talk, maybe a confrontation, but she did not expect violence. According to later agreed statements of facts, Loretta sits down, waiting for them to pay what they owed, and then Blake attacks from behind. Loretta fights. She struggles, desperate to survive, for herself and for her unborn baby. The details in official documents describe attempts to suffocate her and blunt force trauma and a prolonged struggle. Loretta resists, and that part matters because too many victims get remembered only as someone who died. Loretta fought. She tried to live, but she was outmatched by someone larger, stronger, and committed to killing her. After she's dead, Blake and Victoria don't call police. They don't seek help. They don't do anything that suggests panic or remorse. They switch into a different mode, a plan mode. They clean. They wipe down. They organize. They put her body into the hockey bag. They take her car keys, her bank cards, her phone, her ID. Then they drive away in Loretta's car like they're just running errands. They buy food. They use her card. They pretend to be her through texts, hoping to buy time before anyone realizes she's gone. And here's the sickest part of that strategy. It's not just about escape. It's about delaying the moment the world starts looking. Because the longer the delay, the harder it is to find a body. The longer the delay, the more distance you can create, and distance is a killer's best friend. Eventually, Blake and Victoria dump the hockey bag in New Brunswick, about 200 kilometers from Halifax, then continue on to Ontario, near the U.S. border. They don't make it. They're arrested on February 18th, still with Loretta's belongings. Loretta's body is found on February 26th. The legal process begins. At first, both Blake and Victoria claim they're innocent. Their lawyers file motions. They request separate trials. But the evidence is overwhelming. Loretta enters the building and doesn't exit. Blake is caught driving her car. Her bank card is used by someone else. The February 8th video exists. The hockey bag footage exists. Her phone is in Victoria's possession. Her cards are with Blake. And at some point right before trial begins, reality lands. On April 22, 2015, Blake changes his plea to guilty first-degree murder. Victoria changes her plea to guilty second-degree murder. In Canada, both carry life sentences, but parole eligibility differs. First-degree murder, eligible to apply after 25 years. Second-degree murder, eligible to apply after 10 years. Eligible to apply does not mean released, it means you can ask. But for Loretta's family, hearing 10 years in the same sentence as my pregnant daughter was murdered feels like an insult from the universe. Sentencing happens on April 28, 2015. The courtroom fills. Loretta's family stands up and speaks, victim impact statements that are raw, shaking, human. Her mother describes grief like a monster that tears you apart from the inside. Her father talks about Loretta's resilience, how she clawed her way back from addiction, how she was going to make a difference. And Loretta's sister, overwhelmed, breaks apart in real time, because that's what grief does when you stop trying to make it polite. The judge describes the crime as disgusting, horrifying, and cowardly. Blake receives life in prison, no parole eligibility for 25 years. Victoria receives life in prison, eligible to apply for parole after 10 years. There's no celebration. There's relief, maybe. There's a moment where the world stops shaking for 1 second, but no sentence brings Loretta back. And here's the cruel irony that makes this case bigger than the courtroom. Loretta was researching missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. She wanted to give voice to people who were ignored. She wanted change. And in the end, she became part of the very crisis she studied. Her death helped spark national conversations. It fed into activism, into pressure for an official inquiry, into the demand that Canada confront what had been happening for decades. Her university created a scholarship fund in her name to support Indigenous students, exactly the path Loretta had carved out. And Loretta's story continued to echo because the world couldn't pretend it was rare. It wasn't. Loretta's case exposed something else too, how perception changes response. There were claims later that early reporting described Loretta as white, and that once her Indigenous identity was emphasized, her family felt a shift in how they were treated. That detail matters, not as a debate point, but as a reality check. Because even in death, Indigenous women can be treated differently depending on how Indigenous people assume they look, and that's part of what Loretta was trying to fight with her work. But the story doesn't end neatly. Over the years, there were parole discussions, controversies, attempts to reposition narratives, and Loretta's family kept showing up. Because grief doesn't leave, it just changes shape. Loretta was 26, pregnant, weeks from graduating. She wanted to be a lawyer. She wanted to be a mom. She wanted to help other women survive. And she was killed over $600. $600. But the real cost wasn't money. It was a future. It was a child. It was a family's peace. It was the kind of work she might have done for the world. So I want to end the only way that feels right, with Loretta, not with them. Loretta wrote words in her thesis that sound heavier now than they ever should have. My story isn't unique. Thousands of girls go through the exact same things. things I honestly couldn't even imagine wishing on another human being. And through this project, I hope to help educate people, open their eyes, and give hope that real change is possible. That was her goal, and even though someone tried to reduce her to a body in a bag, Loretta Saunders still speaks. Because as long as we say her name with respect, as long as we remember she was a whole person, not a headline, she isn't gone, not completely.
If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so YouTube lets you know when we upload a new video. And leave a comment. What case or story do you want us to cover next?